Hello everyone. Before this video gets started, I just wanted to remind everyone that our free online tutoring for the upcoming semester is starting soon. So head over to studystem.org if you need help with chemistry, physics, or biology. Thank you and enjoy the video.
Moving on to question 2. It says, geneticists investigated the mode of inheritance of a rare disorder that alters glucose metabolism and first shows symptoms in adulthood. The geneticists studied a family in which some individuals of generations 2 and 3, which are these, are known to have the disorder. Based on the pedigree, figure 1, the geneticists concluded that the disorder arose in individual 2 of generation 2 and was caused by a mutation in mitochondrial DNA. Now this particular individual is this one, individual 2 belonging to the second generation of the family. Now this whole pedigree explains the mutation of the mitochondrial DNA and how it has passed on to the next generations. Down here we have two tables, one of which explains the average blood glucose level of each individual in generation 4, which is this one. And then below that we have a phenotypic classification of the blood glucose level. The people that have a blood glucose level which is less than 140 milligrams per deciliters are normal. And for people who are at risk, their blood glucose level would be in between 140 to 199 milligrams. And as for the people who are affected with the blood glucose metabolic disorder, their blood glucose level will be greater than or equal to 200 milligrams per deciliter of blood. Part 1 of question 2. This is very simple. The disorder alters glucose metabolism. Describe the atoms and types of bonds in a glucose molecule. So the formula for a glucose molecule is C6H12O6. So this means that it contains three atoms, three different types of atoms, which are hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen. And all of them are bonded to each other via covalent bonds. Moving on to the second part. Using the template in the space provided for your response, construct an appropriately labeled graph based on the data in Table 1. Determine one individual who is both at risk of developing the disorder and has a significantly different blood glucose level from that of individual 4-1. So we have to use the two tables given in the question, which are this one and this one of which tells us about the average blood glucose level of each individual of the fourth generation, and the other one which tells us the phenotypic classification of the blood glucose level. It tells us which people are normal, which ones would be at risk, and which ones would be affected based on the blood glucose level concentration in the blood. Now, a properly constructed graph would look something like this. You have the x-axis, which represents the individuals of the fourth generation, and the y-axis, which represents the average blood glucose level of each one of those individuals. And if you compare this graph with the table given in the picture, you can clearly see each individual matches the right blood glucose level as well as the right uncertainty in his or her blood glucose level. The next part of the question says to determine one individual who is both at risk of developing the disorder and has a significantly different blood glucose level from that of individual 4-1. So according to the phenotypic classification table, we know that the people who are at risk of developing the disease have a blood glucose level in the range of 140 to 199. And the only people who are in that range would be individual number 2, 3, and 4, all except 1, because we are comparing the individuals with individual number 1. And the question also says that the blood glucose level needs to be significantly different from that of individual 4-1. So the only individual who has a blood glucose level significantly different from that of individual 1 is individual 4-3. So that's the only answer that you'll get in this question. The next part of the question says, based on the pedigree, identify all individuals in generation 4 who can pass on the mutation to their children. So, using the graph we have, as well as the table of the phenotypes, we can identify the people who will be able to pass on the mutation to their children. And those people include individual 1, individual 2, and individual 4. And why are these individuals able to pass on the mutation? Because the phenotypic table tells us that these individuals are at a risk of developing the disease, and there is a great enough chance that they can potentially pass on the mutation to their children in the future. As for the individual number 3, even though his blood glucose level is above 140, it's only slightly above 140. So compared to the other individuals, compared to individual 1, 2, as well as 4, there is a very little chance that individual number 3 will be able to pass on the mutation to his or her children. The next part of this question says, based on the fact that individual 2 of the second generation is affected, a student claims that the disorder is inherited in an X-linked recessive pattern. Based on the student's claim, predict which individuals of generation 3 will be affected by the disorder. So, in order to understand this question, you will have to understand X-linked recessive pattern. An X-linked recessive pattern refers to a genetic condition which is associated with mutations in the X chromosome. Now, you might already know that for males, they contain XY chromosomes as their sex chromosomes, whereas females contain XX chromosomes as their sex chromosomes. So, a male carrying a mutation will always be affected because he carries only one X chromosome, whereas a female, they generally do not develop the mutation, do not develop the disorder, and they remain unaffected because they have two X chromosomes. So now, based on the student's prediction of the X-linked recessive pattern, the only individuals that would be affected from generation 3 would be individual 3-4 and individual 3-8, because these are the only two males that have been affected already by the disorder. And since we talked already that males are the ones that contain XY sex chromosomes, they are highly likely, there is 100% chance that they will develop the disease because they only contain one X chromosome. As for the second part, justify why the data do not support the student's claim. So the data does not support the student's claim because according to the student, the pattern here is X-linked recessive, but X-linked recessive affects only males. But the data here shows that some females have also been affected, which goes to show that X-linked recessive pattern is not being followed in the inheritance of this disease.